All right, I see the numbers slowing down. Why don't we go ahead and go through some of these tips? So welcome, everybody. We're really excited to have you join us. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where and when you're joining us. I know some of you have even joining us on demand, which is wonderful. We are here to talk about risk management, and I'm joined with my coworker, Utkarsh. Utkarsh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, Utkarsh here. I'm part of product management team at ServiceNow, and I'm responsible for everything around risk and advanced risk. So those are my passion areas too. And glad to be here today.
Thank you. My name is Teresa Law. I am the Director of Product Marketing for the Risk Products. We have got a jam-packed session for you. We want a lot of interaction. Please ask questions. We want to know what you're thinking. We will do our best to try to answer as many as possible. There's a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. Please use that. I will be jumping in with questions as we go along. We're going to start out with a very brief overview of some of the other sessions that we're going to be hosting in the next month. This is part of a series. We're starting out with risk management today. But later this week, we're going to talk about privacy management. So please mark your calendars for that. The beginning of April, next week after, we'll be talking about vendor risk management. And we're very excited to be joined by one of our integration partners, EcoVadis. And then we're going to finish up with policy and compliance on the 8th. We might be sneaking another one in at the very end for business continuity management. So be on the lookout for that. But I believe that is it. Again, please utilize your Q&A button. The session is being recorded, so be aware of that. It will be up on the Ask the Experts channel on YouTube shortly after the event. So if you're looking forward again, please look for that, and I'll put a link in the chat for that playlist, so you'll be able to find it. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Utkarsh to walk us through some really cool stuff for risk management.
Thank you, Teresa. And I think, like I said, this is a really exciting release for me. So the San Diego new look and feel of the entire application, it's something that I have been waiting for personally. When I initially saw the designs, I was very excited about it. And I think now it looks more modern, more neat. And some of the good things that we have really done around the San Diego releases, having these workspaces integrated. So something we released last September, and I'm just showing that across. So you can see these new workspaces that are there. So if you are a user who has multiple workspaces, you can see that. It's quick to navigate to a particular area. You can mark certain things as favorites to say, this is something I want to go about. And even this homepage design, right? It is something that is the first thing, right? When I log in into the system, I can see the tasks that are assigned to me, approvals. So it's really bringing in a lot of great information to me up front, and that simplifies the navigation a lot from what we were used to. And I love this new purple color, the dark theme effect that is really good to the eyes in the night specifically. So a lot of good things in the San Diego family release.
And you can make it black too. You can make the background black also if you wanted to.
Yeah,
I mean, so it's really very configurable. Which I like the fact that workspaces there, if you click on workspaces, you'll get a list of all the different workspaces, so you can jump between workspaces really easily. That, I mean, I think they did a nice job on that.
Absolutely, Teresa. And the icing on the cake is all the new features that on top of what we have done, right? So you're getting a lot more new features in all the applications across the board here. So you can, so for example, in risk, I'm really excited to talk about some of these today. For example, the new Heatmap workbench, which you see on the left-hand side. So this is something where we released in the September release of where we released the new Heatmap, which is based on seismic. But now you have a much more neat, it's very, very sleek user interface that you get along with San Diego family. So it's really great there. I'm also excited to talk about the first line integration. So one of the questions I was always getting from all the partners, customers, and even internal sales is, what's our UX strategy, right? How can we embed risk and compliance into the first line workflows? And I think our integration with Employee Center is heading us there, right? So it's actually spot on in terms of how employees, how you want your GRC activities and tasks to be embedded for employees and making sure they can complete their task across. So really interesting bit of things that we have done there. There's also a new application altogether. So in fact, this is a application that we released last in our ESG offering. So I know this is still on ESG, is still on pilot mode, but now metrics is being used for monitoring your KRIs and KCIs so that you can manage your RAG status and monitor your key risk and controls more effectively, define the alert mechanism and stuff like it. So I'll showcase some of this today, right, when I talk about it. But I know everybody is waiting for one thing, and it is really that support for more than one entity class in risk assessment methodology. So I think all of you, whosoever has interacted with me, has given this feedback that they have been facing this as a challenge during implementation, where customers are saying we want to apply the risk assessment methodology to more than one entity class. So that's available to you too as well, right? So a lot of great things to talk about. And without further ado, I would like to go into the details and maybe showcase some of this today. Would that be interesting to see, Teresa, for you and
I think
others?
it'd be fantastic. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I've been looking at some of these features the last few days, and they look really, really, really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me show the first one, which is really the heat map, right? It's a new look and feel on the heat map. And for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in into my environment because I always find it better to actually do live demos than the actual
Yeah,
PowerPoints.
I think seeing it live is great. This heat map is actually really very useful. Honestly, I mean, I didn't realize that you could change it so that you could see the actual risks in there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That was pretty slick.
So if you look at this now visualization, so there's a shortcut here. So the idea is you get a quick summary on like a dashboard or a home page. And that's from where you can launch this heat map workbench, which is like the full page view. And the intention behind this is really you're walking into a room of senior management and executives, and you don't want to create a PowerPoint. You want to take this system across with you so that when you go into a room and let's talk about our risk profile for our organization. So now typically your conversation will start on the top right zone. So you can see there are 14 odd risks. So a lot of times your conversations will start around there, and people would say, hey, let's go through each risk one by one, understand what is happening around it. And that is where we have developed an immersive mode where you can see what those 14 are. And as soon as you go into immersive mode, the system understands this is where you want to kickstart your conversation around this record or around this risk. It brings all the different information around this risk. So for example, what's my risk rating trend, both inherent and residual? What's my description about this risk? Who's the owner of this risk? If there are KRIs, risk events, issues, or the hierarchy, what is there? So all of this information really helps you have that conversation where if somebody has a question, yeah, this risk is high, what are we doing about it? You can go check that across. Oh, did this risk really materialize for us in the last 6 months? Yeah, it did, because you had risk events here, right? So those are the kind of things. And a lot of times you would go and talk about what was the discussion point last time, and that's where you can look at the activity log, see all the comments that you made last time when you were reviewing this risk with your senior management, and then capture them this time across as well, to say next time when I come, I should have a history of what we have done. So this is how you can look at the details. A lot of times you may want to pull in additional details or additional context, and that's where you have actions on the top to actually see the complete 360-degree view of this risk. So this is going to launch our cool 360-degree visualization so that you can analyze all these details around this risk, come back to it on the workbench, or maybe open up the assessment too if you need to, right? So this is how you can go have a conversation with your senior management there. You can also do, once you're done with this particular zone, you can move to the next one. Maybe next thing they want to look at is the high impact risk with a likely likelihood, right? So you can go into the second one, and if you see, the system highlights the one that are in bold, and the everything else is grays out, but then it is still clickable so that you can see those here too, right? So that's how you can have that conversation even without creating a PowerPoint. You can always go back, and let's say if you are now maybe sharing it across for some reason, yeah,
the nice thing is all on one page.
that
It's
is
all
all
on
in
one
one.
page. So,
Yes,
think about the number of clicks that you've eliminated of having to
absolutely.
go to all the different pages to be able to pull this information up. It's phenomenal.
Absolutely. And that was the purpose behind it. When you're having this conversation, you don't want to click multiple things, lose context of things. You want to focus on that risk, bring everything together there.
So this is the question here is, are we looking at a risk instance? So I think it has, yeah.
That is correct. Yes. And a lot of times you may want to just look at it from an aggregated perspective too, right? So that's why you can toggle between different views. So you have the name view, you have the index view, depending on how much of information you want to see or what's your communication mechanism generally. So again, in this view here, if you just mouse over, a lot of times you may want to see what this 20227 is. And you have the same information on the right, by the way. So you have the full card for you to understand that context, make sense of it, what my 20227 is. If you want to see or toggle between an inherent and a residual profile, you can do this here too. And obviously compare and contrast the different viewpoints across the organization. So this is mainly from an op risk perspective. I can always switch to a different context. Let's say in this case, I have a methodology, which is ServiceNow ERM. And if you see, it adjusted from a 3x3 matrix to a 5x5 matrix here, right? So how quickly you can toggle between these different viewpoints, compare and contrast things. And if you're looking for a particular risk, let's say in this case here, I'm looking for a risk around, let's say IT as my risk category. I can simply type in IT, and it will show me all the risks that are matching the risk category as IT for me, right? So really simple to use in terms of creating those filters. If you have advanced filters, you can always apply them here, similar to the way you are doing on the list view, where you can say, yeah, I want to look at maybe risk around a particular entity, right? So you can always type in that entity, saying the accessible entities, Acme, branch, banking, right?
And you can filter on different departments or divisions.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
we've got a few questions that have come in. One of them was, we already answered it. You can change it to a 5x5 or a 6x6 or a 3x3. It's very configurable. You can filter on different departments or divisions. Can you use this for quantitative or only qualitative?
So generally heat maps are morely used for qualitative risk assessment. It's not really used for quantitative risk assessment. So that's why this one is focused on the qualitative side.
That's true.
Awesome. So you can always save this filter too. So next time around, I don't have to apply or build my conditions to say these are the data that I want to look at. I can simply save my heat map. And when I'm back next time around, I can simply go to my saved list here, and I can see the different views that I'm always used to looking at. So the system remembers what you have done so that you can always apply those views next time around when you're there.
Yeah. And I think just to remind people, the way you got here was from your dashboard. You had your heat map on your dashboard. You just clicked on the icon, went into the heat map workbench.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is the first thing that really excites me, because it simplifies the reporting. It really brings your communication of risk posture very easily to senior management. And a lot of times this is the key visualization that is being used by customers. So we wanted to make sure we are providing the best in class visualization to our customers and delighting them when they are having that experience across.
And you use the UI builder to build the workbench, but you don't have to, it comes with the product, right? You don't have to have, the customer's not building it themselves.
Yes, absolutely. It comes out of the box.
That's exactly. So that's a question. And then the other question, our last question I see for Heatmap here is, Can you share this? So if you want to share it with your team or with others, is there a way to share the information?
Not as of today, but that is certainly as a roadmap item we are tracking, Teresa. So there was a lot of feedback from customers. So earlier we were thinking of sharing this as a PDF, but when we did our research, we figured out the need is a bit more, right? Rather than just taking a print of it. So what we are planning to do is maybe integrate with the PowerPoint or a PDF so that you can have your heat map along with the text, along with some additional reports and things like that. So look at it like maybe ServiceNow Enterprise Risk Management Report, which is a 30-page document, and that is going to be automated. So that is what we are looking to do in the future releases.
That sounds fantastic. Well, we will wait to see how it manifests itself.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't see no more questions on Heatmap. Great. Thank you guys for asking the questions. We really appreciate all the interaction.
Always. It's always good to have it interactive rather than being a one-sided affair always. Yeah. And the second thing, which is improving your risk monitoring, again, is really metrics. So we have been getting a lot of feedback and a lot of customer needs to say, how do we manage our red, amber, green thresholds in the system easily? So we are really leveraging our indicators capability primarily for it earlier, or we were actually using our performance analytics to position such kind of red, amber, green. But both have their challenges. While indicators didn't have really thresholds, performance analytics indicators were too cumbersome for business managers and business risk managers or operational risk managers to define. So we heard you, we analyzed what you need. So what we are doing is we are releasing a net new capability now, which we are calling it as metrics. And the objective is for your KRI and KCI monitoring. This is what we're going to use primarily, right? Since this is a new concept, I'll use maybe a couple of slides just to set the context up, and then I'll switch into the system to talk about how do you actually do end-to-end life cycle of the metrics. So in terms of the business problem, like I said, it's really around the indicators that we got feedback that the indicators do not really fulfill all the use cases that we hear from customers around RAG metrics. So there was a definite need, there was a definite gap. And we also realized currently a lot of our customers were using indicators more for continuous control monitoring and continuous control assessment. So from a future direction perspective, what we're going to do is reposition our indicators. So indicators will always exist in the product, but metrics will be used more for KRIs and KCIs kind of use case. So in terms of the key features, right, there are a lot of unique features in metrics in comparison to indicators. And in fact, I have a slide which clearly differentiates between the two, because I know there's a lot of confusion around these. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to position our indicators capability more towards continuous control assessment, continuous control testing kind of use case, while your metrics will be used for KRIs and KCIs. And therefore, it's very, very quantitative driven. So there's no notion of pass and fail. It's a numeric number that you're collecting. And based on that value, you're comparing with the thresholds and the targets that you have defined to say, where do you stand? And then we're going to have integration with our flow designer to make sure when you have these breach of thresholds, you can define your action plan to say, what are you doing in order to manage that breach of threshold? And also maybe reinitiate risk assessment as an action plan for you. So those are the capabilities in terms of making sure you're able to monitor your key risk and controls and also take actions as you see the risk and the control profile changing, right? So obviously this will allow you to automate and digitize your complete KRI and KCI management workflows. And because of the power of the ServiceNow platform, you can obviously use this capability not just to collect data within ServiceNow, but even outside ServiceNow. So that if you have, let's say, KRIs, which are fetching in information from maybe SAP system, Workday system, and other enterprise platforms, you can always leverage our automated metrics to collect those kind of information from those areas. Or if you want to start small, which is normally through a manual process, you also have a review and approval workflow for you to define, to make sure before the manual data is getting published, somebody is reviewing it and somebody is providing a sign off it across. So that's really an end-to-end comprehensive workflow that you get as part of the metrics for functionality. And in order to further automate, in order to further reduce the mundane tasks that customers were doing when they were managing their metrics, one of the insights we got is a lot of time, if there's a metric, let's say, or a KRI around, let's say, number of customer incidents. Now I'm watching that metric across different product lines, but I want to also watch it from an aggregated enterprise risk perspective to say, how are we doing for, let's say, ServiceNow as a whole. So what the system does is it automatically does that aggregation too, so that you don't have to create that metric at multiple levels. So you can monitor these metrics at a granular level, and automatically it would pull up the information at an aggregated level to say what's happening at an enterprise level. So really a lot of exciting stuff. And this is available to all IRM professional and enterprise customers. So in terms of the packaging, that's the packaging that is available for the metrics application.
All right, we want to see it now.
Absolutely, let's do that. So I'll just flash one slide just to compare and contrast the indicators and metrics, and then I'll move into the live demo. So if you see, these are the features that we had for indicators. Obviously, there's an overlap with metrics because some of the core functionalities remain the same. But if you see the delta, there's a specific set of features which are specific in indicators, and those are aligned to more continuous control assessment. So we haven't brought it to metrics, but then there are a lot of new features that you only get as part of the metrics functionality that we are releasing, right? So this is what you will get. And typically, this is the kind of report customers are looking to get out of the KRI. And let me show you how do you do it in the system now.
Yeah, it really complements. Yeah, it really complements our indicators, which are so powerful. The indicators are so powerful. So this is
absolutely. So here's a metric, like an indicator template. Let's say just to draw some analogies. So we call it as a metric definition. So this is like a template of the metric that you're defining. This is generally done by the second line, who is saying, if you, in order to monitor this risk or maybe a group of risks, this is the KRI that we are tracking. So you define what your KRI is. So you can provide all the details around the KRI, such as the name, description, whether it's a manual one or an automated one, who the owners are, right? From in the ownership of a metric, as well as who the data owners are of this metric, right? So because this is a manual KRI, it means somebody is going to provide that data task. So you can always assign that ownership across, so that you have a neck to hold in case there's a breach of this metric and somebody wants to understand what's happening around it, right? And you'll also be able to add attributes such as whether the metric is going to be a leading metric or a lagging metric. So generally, customers like to classify their KRIs and KCIs by that. You can also define what's my strategy around it, right? Is it something that we are looking to minimize as a value, or is it something that we are looking to maximize as a value? And that has a bearing on the thresholds. So when you go and define your thresholds out, which, by the way, can vary period on period. So you're not restricted to just one threshold, but you can define multiple thresholds for all the future periods. So imagine your sales target. I know every quarter we have different sales target that we set for our sales team as an example. So I'm sure customers would like to do the same when they want to do their Ember and Red threshold as well as the target value. So you can do that here. And the point is, generally, if it's a minimized kind of a metric, that if you're looking to minimize the metric, your Red threshold will generally be higher than your Ember threshold. But if it's a maximized kind of a metric, it would be vice versa. So that's why there's a business validation in place to make sure you're inputting the right set of data here and maintaining that across. So this is how you can create a metric, set it on an autopilot mode. So like always, you can say the go collect information on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis. And these are the users to whom these tasks will be sent across. And then these are the approvers who are going to review and approve it. So once those metrics data task is collected, making sure that somebody is reviewing it. And now in case you have confidential metrics, right? So really metrics where you want only a restricted set of users to see that information, you can always define that confidential metrics. And you can say, these are the users of the group who will have access to that information. So this is really optional.
So that's really a security. That's one of the security things in place here, protection, data protection, basically.
Yes, and that's a focus area across the product line. So you'll see this being a focus area for us this year. A lot of focus on security, tightening the access control. So this is just a step in that direction here. Yeah. Now, once you've defined that metric and defined the thresholds out, the next step is generally applying it to the risk statements to say, what are the risks we are monitoring this metric from? So in this case, you can see I'm monitoring this metric in correspondence to the risk around bribe, where employees are involved in bribe-related activity, or maybe they are receiving preferential treatments, right? And what the system does is smartly, it looks at all the risks that are tagged to this risk statement, and it creates like a metric instance for me. And then it creates the data task across for individual owners to respond to. And based on the thresholds that you have defined, you can then compare and contrast how are we performing. So in this case, you can see for Acme US, we are in green. For retail banking, we are amber. And while for small finance bank, we are red. So 3 different entities, 3 different statuses of the metric. And icing on the cake is at each of the metric level, the thresholds may differ. So we do understand that each BU or each line of business may be at different level of maturity. They may want to have flexibility to define their own thresholds out. So you're not restricted to just one enterprise threshold. You can set your BU level thresholds or line of business level thresholds, where you can say, even though the enterprise view is the Ember threshold is maybe 30, but from this context perspective, we want to make sure maybe the thresholds are lower to say 10, and let's say maybe not 10, maybe 20 and maybe 30, right, as a change. So that's how we make it easy for each line of business to adopt these thresholds, align them to their respective needs. And if you see, suddenly things will change. In this case, it did not, because it's still below the Ember threshold here, but otherwise things would have changed here.
So the couple questions that come in, just to kind of clarify a little bit about metrics. The question is, what's the difference between this and evidence request process? And I think that there's kind of not a subtle difference, but we're really not trying to collect evidence here. I mean, you could definitely use this to determine whether or not you're meeting your assigned policy requirements, but it's not really designed to be an evidence collection tool.
Yes, it's not. Metrics are generally used by customers to monitor their key risk and key controls. Let me put it that way. Yeah. Right? So if you have, let's say, 100 risks in your organization, and out of that, you analyze these are the top 20 risks, you have to monitor them more closely. Your assessments are happening every 3 months, every 6 months, or maybe yearly fashion. You don't want to wait for that 3 months or 6 months to say what's happening around that risk. And that's where metrics comes in to say, I can create a monthly metric and it's going to give me an early warning indication, right? Yeah. To say, oh, suddenly the risk is changing. And I'll draw one analogy just to kind of do that clarification. Whenever I drive my car, I'm always looking at the fuel gauge to tell me, oh, how many kilometers can I drive more? How many miles can I cover more? That for me is a metric, right? It's telling me how soon I'm going to run out of fuel. So similarly, when you're managing your risk and controls, you want to monitor the key risk and define your metrics out so that whenever there's a change in the posture, you're quickly able to understand, analyze it, and take actions on it before it's too late.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy. That's a great analogy. So I think hopefully that clears that up for that question. Are the metrics created for every entity automatically, or does the user have the ability to select the entities?
So it's a choice. That's an excellent question, in fact. So what we have done is I mean, there could be two ways you can create metrics. Either it could be top down, where the second line is saying, if you have this risk, you need to have this metric in place. And that is where the system would push down these metrics across. There's always a choice to the first line to create their own metrics and say this metric, it does not apply to the enterprise as a whole. It's very, very specific to our line of business. And that's where you can track your metrics against your respective entities too. So really it's dependent on you as a customer to make that choice.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, the whole concept of ServiceNow product is flexibility, giving the people the ability to make it work for them, for their unique circumstances. Another question here is, you've got your enterprise owner, you've got your user, you've got your approver. Is there a way to make it so that there are multiple enterprise owners or multiple approvers or multiple users that you want to send this to?
Absolutely. You can always use this option of user group, where instead of assigning to a named user, you're assigning it to a group, and anyone within that group is actually owning the metric or maybe providing the data or providing the approvals on it. So that's always a possibility here.
Perfect. So, flexibility.
Again, yeah.
All right, that's all the questions we have for our metrics.
Awesome.
Good questions. Good
awesome.
questions.
I'll just finish up with a small data task UI on how it looks and feels. And there's a lot of investment. So in fact, because we have realized this as a product is gonna also cater to our ESG product line. So there's a lot of investment we're gonna make, where there are investment into the look and feel of how the metric data tasks should look like. So in case you have, let's say, 50 odd tasks of metrics that you have to respond to, we don't want you to do those 50 clicks and then do that job. So right now, I know it's a simple form, but from a direction perspective, there is investment into this to make sure it's much simpler. You can do like a bulk activity on this. And also, I know a lot of you may be having that question in mind. Hey, we used to have PA. What happens to PA? There's a lot of overlap of functionality. Is ServiceNow doing some level of self-cannibalization? No, we are not. So what we are looking to do is the metrics functionality in the future may use PA as the backend engine for itself. So you get all that goodness that you associate with the PA engine, all that power of trending, forecasting, analysis that you get with PA engine. But the front end is where we will focus on. The front end and the workflow is where we will focus on as a BU to add that intelligence layer on top of it. So that you don't have to go and define a PA indicator. You don't have to go through that training or defining a PA indicator. For you, it's a very simple metric that you're defining. And in the back end, we are doing all the heavy lifting to making sure, we are able to define those PA indicators. So that's the direction from a strategic perspective we are heading to. There's no cannibalization. There are clear differentiations between indicators, metrics, and performance analytics indicators in place here.
Okay, good to know. Got a couple more questions that came in while you were talking. Can you create a shared metric across multiple risk statements?
Absolutely. So that's why your metrics to risk statements mapping is a M2M. So many to many mapping. So you can use this metric not just to monitor one risk, but you can use it to monitor multiple of these risk statements always.
Yep. All right, that answers that question. And then another question on your approvers. If you've got a list of 5 approvers, do they all have to approve to move it to the next stage?
So that is configurable too, because we are using the sys approval workflow primarily. So right now, out of the box, when you, let's say, send it to a group in terms of the approval, any one of them can approve it. But if this is something you want to change, that is always, as configurability is always an option that is provided in the ServiceNow platform for you.
You have all the right answers. So one more question here. And I'll just preface this with, in general, with ServiceNow product, we don't provide predefined KRIs or KCIs or templates, or because every organization is different. We realize that. We do have content packs that include controls or assessments that have not been assigned yet. We do provide some of those for specific use cases, like around RMF, for example. or socks. And we have partners, integration partners on the ServiceNow store that provide these content packs, that provides indicators that you can always use. But we don't really have predefined KRR, KCIs that can be uploaded and used as a starting point, right?
That is correct, Tessa. So we depend on our partners and the content providers. As
Yeah.
of today, we don't want to get into that space, at least.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I would encourage, the person who asked the question to go look on the ServiceNow store, because we do have some great content packs that are out there, both that we have created and that our partners have created, that do include KRIs and KCIs that you can use. So I think that's the end of the questions for the metrics.
Awesome. I'm really excited to share the next one, right? So really, it's around the employee center. So for those of you who are unaware about, or maybe you have not heard about Employee Center is ServiceNow-wide initiative to harmonize and bring all employee-related workflows on one out-of-the-box portal. So what was happening previously is each product line was building its own portal experiences, which means from an employee perspective, it was too disconnected as an experience. So if I want to raise an IT request, I was supposed to go to maybe an ITSM portal. If I had an HR request, I was supposed to go to an HR portal. Even if I have a GRC task, I have to go to a third portal. So it led to a lot of issues, a lot of, I would say, friction from the employees to remember what portal to log to. So that's where Employee Center comes in, where Employee Center harmonizes all these workflows, which are employee facing, and bring it into one integrated experience that is available to customers. And needless to say, GRC is definitely one of the initial ones there. So we wanted to make sure we are simplifying, we are embedding our workflows, our GRC activities and tasks into where employees go on a day-to-day basis. So there's low friction for the employees to actually have visibility of those tasks and complete them. So you have one less reason for an overdue GRC task now. That's how I want to put it. And really, I mean, I would kind of highlight some of the key areas in terms of what Employee Center looks and feels. So I know it's going to be a new topic for a lot of you. So I'm just going to talk about two things, right? In Employee Center from a capability perspective. So there are two packages. One is a basic package. So earlier, prior to, I think, Rome release, what we were doing was we were charging customers for this Employee Center or employee portal experience. But as a basic package now, it's available to all ServiceNow customers. So you don't have to pay for the basic package. If you buy ServiceNow, you get Employee Center standalone, right? While the professional packages where there are a lot more features and there are a lot more capabilities, and that's where you can actually procure that additional license. So what we have done is we have also integrated our GRC experience into it. So this is just a quick snapshot of how the two versions of the Employee Center look like. But really from a GRC focused perspective, when we were trying to analyze what kind of task, what kind of workflows we want employees to do, we thought there are three broad buckets of the task. The first one is really being more proactively involved, being a whistleblower in the organization to report an issue, maybe report a risk event, or maybe request a policy exceptions. And those are just out of the box catalog items. I've seen you guys and our partners, customers building their own catalog items where they want employees to be more involved. And that's where we position Employee Center again to say, hey, okay, these are the GRC request or report incidents that you can report. Second thing is GRC task, your control attestation task, your risk assessments, your metric data task now, or maybe things like just reviewing and approving stuff. So all of these comes as things which again you want employees, their managers, your business leaders to complete and perform in order for you for GRC to be pervasive. So we brought all those across as well for employees to focus on and really simplified that experience across again for them. Show you how it looks and feels as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to impersonate as an employee and show you that experience of how it looks and feels here.
So this is anybody in the organization, just every employee should be able to use this. This is what this is meant for. This is your go-to
Yes.
portal for all of your IT, your GRC, your service requests, this is it. No more multiple portals to try to change between.
And this is out of the box native experience, right? So you don't have to spend a lot of time configuring your own portal. And I know a lot of customers have burned their fingers, right? And trying to configure, trying to understand what are the best practices around configuring a portal.
Yeah,
So
and this actually replaces the ServiceNow portal, right?
Yes, that's correct. So the service portal will be primarily used for IT, I mean, not employee, but more from an IT perspective. So this is any employee related workflow. So you will have it on Employee Center.
Are there any specific roles that are needed for this? It's every employee. I mean, there's no specific role, right?
So for you to do your GRC activities, you obviously need GRC roles. So you need to have things like a GRC business user role. That's when you can actually perform the GRC task, right?
Okay.
So we want to make sure, yeah.
Okay, so as an employee, if I had to acknowledge a policy, I would have to be designated as a GRC business user.
That's correct. That's correct. Yes.
Okay, got it.
I'll just lay down the kind of a navigation pattern here in the Employee Center. So on the top, you'll see the banner. Obviously, you can configure this banner to personalize it for your respective organization. And there are two links here on the top. The first links allow you to track your task. The second thing allows you to track your requests that you've made, or maybe things that you've reported, right? And below that, this is where the navigation menu is for example, if there are multiple things around IT, right, that you have, or maybe even HR or CSM. So depending on the products that you buy from ServiceNow, the respective menus would be enabled, the respective pages would be enabled. So we have an out-of-the-box page for GRC, which is really around risk and compliance. And if you open this page, you can see the 3 catalog items, which are really reporting a risk event, reporting an issue, or requesting a policy exception. So for example, here, if I want to report a risk event, I get a really nice conversational interface so that as an employee, again, I'm informed about what kind of details are being asked. And it's very simple for me. I don't have to go through rounds and rounds of training for me to report a simple risk event to my risk management team, right? So that's how, using this interface here, I could simply type in what the event is, describe the details across, tag it to maybe my entity where I belong, and provide an estimate as to how much loss are we going to incur because of this event, right? Once you report it, you can obviously track it. So I'll show you where you can track it across, so that in case somebody has, let's say, further questions around a particular risk event. So let's say this is a risk event that I reported. Now somebody in the risk management team is analyzing it, and they need inputs from you as your business, as your employees around this risk event. You can obviously have that conversation right here. You can add more evidence, keep track of it, so that you know whatever you reported is being looked on, is being actioned on, right? And it's not sitting in a silo. So that's the first focus area for you as an employee, making things easier, right, for you to track those items across.
So I've got a question for you. This is a trick question. So you just showed me the form for a risk event. What if I used the virtual agent to enter my risk event? I would still see my risk event in that list of risk events. So it doesn't matter how I enter it, right? Whichever I'm more comfortable with. I'll still see my risk event, and I can still add more information from that list also. So we again, right? It's all about flexibility.
Absolutely, Teresa. We are all about multiple options to employees depending on the preference they have. So that's always available to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the second thing I want to show is on the Employee Center, control attestations, or maybe privacy assessment, risk identification questionnaires. So all kind of things where you are asking employees for inputs, and there are certain things that you want employees to do. So for in this example, you want the control owners within the first line to attest to the controls. So you can see I had 11 attestation requests and all of them are overdue here for me. So I can simply click on one and understand what that control is in context of which entity I want to attest it and complete my attestation right from here, right? So again, it's all about simplicity. It's all about providing that options to employee to complete their task quickly and efficiently so that you don't have to spend time in training them across while using your GRC system.
So
The
I actually don't know the answer to this question, so I'm gonna ask the question here, because Employee Center is actually, it's not a, we didn't from the risk business unit, we didn't create it. I mean, we're basically plugging into, you know, an employee workflow product. Do you know if Employee Center is available on the mobile app?
It is, Tess. So
Okay,
Employee
I
Center
thought it
has
would be
a
maybe,
mobile
but I
equivalent.
wasn't gonna say yes. All right, good.
And there's a lot of investment there. I mean, one of the things that I've realized is from the senior management within ServiceNow, there's a lot of investment into Employee Center. So you'll see a lot of features, a lot of simplification of all employee related experiences on Employee Center being the core of it. And that's why GRC is so very important for them.
So you just showed an assessment that sparked a question for somebody. So they're asking if you can use the group assessment option here also.
That's part of the plan. So we were not able to scope it in the first release, but that's definitely something we are looking to enhance in our future releases.
Okay. Perfect.
So I talked about control attestation, risk identification questionnaire. What about other tasks, right? What about other experiences? Like maybe an RCSA is an example. So that's where you can see this tile, which is showing you all the GRC tasks that you have. Now, one of the things we realized is we have two different UI technology stacks, technically speaking. So Employee Center still uses the service portal technology, while we have migrated all our experiences to the new Seismic UI. So that's where we designed this page to integrate with Employee Center simply, where you can look at all the tasks that are assigned to you. So I can look at the 15 different tasks, in this case, that are assigned to me as an employee. I can obviously deep dive into what those 15 tasks are, and I can see 11 of them are around control attestation, 4 of them are around risk assessments. So I can go and complete those across too. So it's not just the task, which are, I would say, like an assessment or an attestation. So if you are building your own workflows, let's say, and if you have designed on workspace experience, which is simple enough for the employees to actually do that, complete that task across, you can always leverage this kind of an integration we have done to provide visibility into the task. And the good thing I like about it is, again, the focus on not just your task, but as a team. So with pandemic, we have been moving into this model where instead of having individual ownership, you have a team ownership. And that's where we want to provide that visibility of those tasks, also provide some metrics to say if these tasks are overdue or if them in progress, so that you can quickly filter and go and complete those across. So that's always available as an option too for you to provide that. So complete end-to-end visibility of GRC tasks on one single page is what you get with this capability here.
Yeah, and I think that this is the answer to the question that someone actually asked. I think it's a really good thing to point out is, you know, the Employee Center is really for your control owners, your everyday employees, your business users, right? Yes. This is how we're really engaging that front line of users that it's so hard to engage. We're not doing away with workspaces. Workspaces are still there. You know, we just saw how we can get to them easily. I mean, workspaces are used primarily really for what, second and third line, honestly. Not so much that front line that the Employee Center is for. So no, workspaces are here to stay. They're only going to get better. This is for your employees. So yeah, I think we have. Go ahead.
I'll just clarify one point here, Teresa, specifically. So like I said, there was a lot of inputs or queries from the partners, customers around our UX strategy, right? Mm-hmm. How do we differentiate between a portal, a workspace, right? So like you said, wherever we see there's a practitioner, there's a power user in the system, right? He needs more power. He's aware about, let's say, GRC workflows. He's driving the change, right? So he's the change driver. So that's where we use Workspace. So even from a first line perspective, if there are risk specialists in the first line, and that's very much prevalent in the operational risk as an area, so they're going to be having a workspace. And in fact, natively, we have a workspace for them too as part of this release. We call it the business op risk manager. So that's a new workspace that you're getting. But for areas where it's really an employee, it's not his day-to-day job to manage risk or compliance. It's just one of his responsibilities. And that's where we want to leverage employee center. So that's how I would differentiate. If you're a practitioner, if you're a power user, workspace. If you are an employee, you want to just do your tasks that are assigned to you, maybe at times report some things, that's where you use employee center.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. We got about 10 minutes left. I know we got a lot more stuff we could possibly talk about, but what can you talk about in 10 minutes?
I know there's a lot of things that you cover. I'll skip some of these and I'll try to medium to see if I can share it across with everyone here. Otherwise, but really what I want to focus on is also some of the ARA enhancement. And again, this is based on what we heard from our customers. So our entire roadmap is very, very customer driven. So I would like to actually thank all of you present on the call today. Some of you have really provided us input into these roadmap items. So for example, I must have spoken to 10 plus partners and they requested a need for support for more than one entity class in the risk assessment methodology. So when they're defining their risk assessment methodologies, one of the challenges they ran into is, if I have an IT risk assessment methodology as an example, it can be used for assessment of business application, network servers, routers, pretty much every IT asset. But they were not able to model this across because we were asking them, what is that one pointed entity class, right? So now with the new release that has been enabled, where if you go into your risk assessment methodology form, you can just not focus on one methodology, but you can apply the same methodology to pretty much do risk assessment from multiple of these areas. So that really reduces the amount of maintenance, the amount of setup that you are supposed to do with respect to the risk assessment methodology here. So in this case here, as an example, IT risk assessment can be used for assessment of asset. It could be used for assessment of business applications, business service, computer, server, and you can keep adding to the list, right? So that in the future, if you have more classes of things, right, that you want to use this assessment methodology to, you can keep adding to the list without the need for creating a new one here.
Great.
So that is the first one. Really, showcase. I know a lot of you are waiting for this. Second thing I want to talk about is really driving, or again, embedding risk assessments as part of the digital workflows in your organization. So we heard from you, you have Flow Designer. You have a powerful engine to configure your workflows. But within those workflows, I want to embed risk assessments so that I can say, if there is an event, automatically initiate a risk assessment. Why should somebody wait for a user to initiate a manual risk assessment? So I want to make sure I can embed that. And what we have done again is focus on that need, focus on that requirement. And with this release, we are just not providing an API for you to initiate these risk assessments, but there's an out-of-the-box Flow Designer action which enables you to initiate these risk assessments as part of the different workflows. So let's say there's a change, there's an ITSM change that somebody has requested on a configuration item, and that impacts my business application. And now you want to reinitiate the risk assessment corresponding to that business application. With this enhancement, you should be able to do that, right? So that's the importance of this enhancement in trying to embed risk assessments across the different workflows in your corresponding organization. Out of the box, for example, we have enabled this for risk events, where whenever you have a risk event and you tag or identify a risk corresponding to that risk event that has been, that has been analyzed, you can on click of a button, you can request a risk assessment on it. So a lot of you may be wondering what that flow designer action looks like. So here's a screenshot of that. There's some mandatory inputs, and then there's our output so that you can use that to embed your risk assessment workflows across. There's also a nice KB article which provides all the details around the API and the flow designer action, as well as providing that model window which appears when you initiate a risk assessment. So for example, in this case here, let's say in the risk event form, I had this risk and I want to initiate a risk assessment on it because I know some things may have changed. I could simply click on this initiate risk assessment. It would bring up a model window and it would initiate a risk assessment for me. So that's how easy it is now for you to initiate risk assessment. You don't have to go to scope. You don't have to go to other places. Any place within the workspaces, you can embed this action to initiate risk assessments.
Awesome. I think we're almost out of time. We've got a bunch of questions. I want to see if you can just answer the questions. We probably don't have time to show people the answers, but if we can answer the questions, I think that'd be awesome. For this, I think, can an entity belong to multiple classes like cloud and application?
No. So entity has to belong to one entity class right now. So it cannot belong to multiple entity classes. Yeah.
Okay. And then you got a big thank you from one of our customers that says, thank you for listening to your customer. We appreciate it. Another question here is, do we need to define only one risk assessment scope for multiple classes?
So risk assessment scope is per entity and per assessment methodology, right? So let's say if I'm assessing a business application, right, which is, let's say, Workday as an example, so that will have an assessment scope for, let's say, IT risk assessment. So for each of the different entities, you have to define your risk assessment scopes across. But one of the things, Tessa, I would like to highlight is, I know there's no time, but in case you're finding it difficult in adoption of this process of creating a risk assessment scope, we have also initiated risk assessment from the risk form itself. So technically speaking, your ARA assessments can now be initiated from the risk form on click of a button, similar to the way you were doing classic risk assessment. So again, that is the feedback. Thank you for all the inputs that you guys have given, in fact, and we have incorporated that change as well. We have simplified it, taken away the need for risk assessment scope if you were finding that challenging.
And I think we're probably going to have another session to go through the rest of these. This is actually recorded. I put the link in the chat for you, everybody listening, to share. We do have a couple more questions, just hopefully really quick. From the back in the heat map, you can show residual risk in addition to inherent risk, right? So that hasn't changed. Okay. No. And then the final question here is, and I forgot which feature this was, but is there a plan to include data segregation across teams so that you can have the same IRM application, for example, enterprise risk managers versus IT risk managers, but they have the same risk manager role, if they can restrict the related lists?
Yeah, I think the question is around access control. Maybe I will touch base offline. I do want to understand that question in details.
It does. Yeah, I think we need to. We kind of get past that. So I told you it was a jam-packed hour. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Truly appreciate it. I'm going to grab the screen really fast here and show everybody, hopefully, the couple places where you can find some more information, our products, and links that are important. And we really appreciate your time. Thank you so very, very much for joining us. And again, check the chat for the link to the Ask the Expert session. Thank you all and have a great day. Thank you, Utkarsh.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.